If somebody didn't speak your language, would you force them to? Or would you try to maybe find a bridge and learn a little bit of their language? Welcome to Glow Within. My name is Katie Connolly. I'm a clinical counselor, somatic and neuro-affirming therapist, and a mom to two. So today I wanted to talk about neurodiverse communication. I think this is a really important topic because still in our society, and this really comes from a very patriarchal perspective, I think, but forcing people to fit into our way of being, right? And so we see this all across the neurodiverse landscape, and we still see it so prevalent in therapy or many therapies. So when we look at language or communication, for example, I prefer to look at communication as a whole because language is really just one part of communication. We see, by and large, trying to force our children who may have other experiences and ways of communicating to fit into our one very narrow way of expressing themselves. And let's be real, the English language is not exactly that robust, right? There are many other languages that, if I'm thinking Farsi in particular, that are so full, right, and expressive, and that's only one of them. So what is the purpose, right? Why are we trying to force our children into one way of expressing themselves rather than maybe building those bridges? I appreciate as a parent, and because of the way our society is being built, that we want to ensure our children have a way to communicate with others and sense that belonging. So I do appreciate that this is coming by and large from a really positive space. But again, taking a step back, which is what I always like to do, it's like, okay, why? And it's because the systems and societies that we live in have this one way of communicating, really, right? And so when we look at neurodiverse communication, it is vast. We see children who have echolalia, so that's the repetition. Sometimes people just think it's mimicry, but really it can be a very soothing way of learning. So repetition in itself, that can be a form of stimming to help calm the nervous system, but it's also repetition that helps us to learn. For parents who really tune in to their child who has echolalia or expresses themselves through echolalia, they start to hear and understand there's meaning behind these seemingly meaningless words. And so that's really beautiful. It's an example of building that bridge. And often when we, again, like nourish the nervous system of any individual, we start to see their ability to integrate. And this is why I do the primitive reflex and the nervous system and somatic work, because we see them able to integrate what they are learning and be able to thereby explore their experience in a more robust way. There's also Alexithymia. So often that is seen as someone who can't connect with their emotions. So they might have a very limited vocabulary around emotions. They often will show it through art, music, behavior, so body language and other forms of expression. So it doesn't mean that they don't feel emotions at all. This is a common misunderstanding, but rather they feel so much, but it's almost like the English language is not eloquent enough to fully embody what their experience is. So I think this is a really beautiful way of honoring more of those expressive forms of communication. And when we can support our children in communicating in these more robust ways, we can also learn so much. And it's not to say that we can't also maybe pair it with a English word so that there is that common bridge, but really encouraging, wow, there is so much expression to be here that maybe I, as a parent who doesn't experience that, could be open to. Synesthesia is a really interesting one. So with synesthesia, that is the blending of senses. So someone may see emotions as numbers. Numbers may represent colors, or they may see colors with numbers. So it's unusual ways of blending our senses. And I actually recently learned from Dr. Tara Swart that there are, I believe, 34 senses that we have. I only knew of the 8 clairs and the eight basic senses, so 16 of them. So I think this is really fascinating and a really just an interesting sort of, again, step back to look at, okay, maybe our way isn't the only way of communicating, right? Maybe, again, when we can honor that our children experience the world in a much more sensory rich way, we can start to sort of honor that experience. And this brings me to telepathy. You might have heard of the telepathy tapes. I think this is absolutely fascinating. The first blog that I ever wrote, actually back in 2011, was on Star Children, and it drew in Dr. Diane Powell's work, who you'll hear featured on the telepathy tapes. She was doing lots of studies with children who are autistic and understanding their connection with telepathy. So telepathy is tapping into that sense of the unseen. So this goes into the clairsenses, and I do have a blog article on this as well. We all tap into the clairsenses. We might just not be aware of it, at least one of them. So it's tapping into that unseen form of communication. So for example, I experienced telepathy, and I dive deep into my clairsenses. More clairsentient and audient are my forms. So being able to feel someone else. So for example, if there is somebody around me usually who needs to say something but is afraid to, I will experience choking sensation in my throat. I will be able to, and I'm very cautious about not tapping into this since I've been in my early 20s because it was too much, but many children experience this and it can be quite overwhelming. Dreams where you're connected with someone else, or even in the day-to-day where you can sense someone else who is not within your physical realm, right? They might be miles away, but you know exactly what is going on. And so being able to honor, again, that these experiences are not bad, they're different, and being able to just even witness and listen and honor the experience that your child is having really helps them to be able to tap into the gift that they already have. And it really can be such a gift. Again, like I said, it's important to have healthy boundaries around this, and this is why I do a lot of the work that I do with children, because I understand this experience. But even the first step of being able to honor it and not dismiss it as silly or whatever, or just imagination, is really, really important. And the reason that I say it's so important is these messages are connected to our interoception, which is understanding our internal cues. So we'll go with basic physiological hunger, etc. And neuroception, our sense of safety or what is not safe. And so the reason that I feel it's so important to honor these other forms of communication is if we don't, we're also telling our children the way you experience the world is not valid. And guess what happens? They shut down, right? They shut that side of themselves down. And now we're seeing so many adults coming back to try to reconnect with this side, to try to heal. So if we honor these experiences for our children, ideally they don't have to break that, and ideally they can carry this gift through their life to honor their full self and find situations for themselves that are healthy. So if you have any questions about this, please leave comments. This is a discussion I absolutely love. And I'm more than happy to share some tools to help you as a parent to also be able to help your child.